Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Zosmer. I'm a former managing editor of the Harvard Crimson. Excited to welcome all of you here once again and introduce our next panel. We're going to hear great voices this time because we get to hear people who are on the radio. If you've tuned into Morning Edition or Weekend Edition or All Things Considered on NPR, you might have heard Chris Arnold's voice. Today you get to see him in person. He's been on public radio since 1993. He's done stories all over the country and even across the world. He covered the Winter Olympics in 2006. He contributed to NPR's award-winning coverage following the September 11th attacks. He was focusing on the lives of people around Ground Zero and the aftermath of the attack and the police departments afterwards. Since 2006, before there even was a financial crisis, he's been covering the financial crisis. A series of stories he did with ProPublica about conflict of interest in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac investments led members of Congress to call for investigations. He won the Edward R. Murrow Award and many, many other awards for his coverage of the financial crisis. And here at the Nieman Foundation, he's studying the future of home ownership in America. Paula Molina has been the anchor and editor of a live primetime news program on Chile's leading news station since 1999. Her award-winning coverage has included major events like the 2010 earthquake and tsunami and the 2011 rescue of miners trapped underground, which is an incredible story. But she's also done longer-term stories, not just breaking news, on poverty and environmentalism that have won many awards. And she's worked not just in radio, but in TV and print journalism as well. Here at the Nieman Foundation, she's studying ways that social networks can bring more voices into journalism. Here you go. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. I should say for Paula, too, Paula's like amazingly famous in Chile. Like I met some people for dinner who happened to be from Chile, and I was like, I know this Paula Molina. I'm in this fellowship, and they're like, you know Paula Molina? It was amazing.
That's true. It's a small country, Chile.
So radio. Why should you care? I understand there's a lot of people who are print reporters, editors from college newspapers. You're probably familiar with the concept that newspapers are under attack sort of economically in this country, and most major newspapers have laid off half their staffs. So radio is a happy story right now. It's sort of a protected island of excellence, you might say, like in the journalism world. And I'm not just like flattering myself, but it's because the economics of radio are different. We didn't get all of our income from classified advertising. So whereas the newspapers got really beat up by the internet, I'm sure you all know, and lost half their revenue, we didn't. And so we've been continuing to grow and be, newspapers are very important in this country, but it's a crisis. It's a real crisis. And radio is one bright spot where things aren't perfect, but they're a heck of a lot better than they are in the print world. And so there's tons of people coming from the print world trying to get jobs at NPR, for example, because we're stable and it's seen as a good place to be. And we're doing good work. So what is radio? And why do we do it? Radio is fun and glamorous.
First reason.
Especially Paula's a little more glamorous. I'm a little more fun, but she's a little more glamorous. And you get to meet interesting people and animals, and you get to talk to them. So, I think one of the fun things about radio, like if you're doing a story about turkeys and turkey farmers, you show up with a microphone and like this guy, with the cow, and you just get like great sounds of people doing what they do.
They're a fun bird, they're a colorful bird.
Oh, we got a
noisy bird. No, but not too noisy. They like to talk, but they don't. Yep, group is too early in the morning.
I thought sorry guys, this volume was supposed to be up. Can we raise the house volume on the, okay. Sorry, we'll try it again.
They're a fun bird, they're a colorful bird. Noisy bird, but not too noisy. They like to talk, but they don't keep you up like roosters do early in the morning.
So, if you're doing a print story, you go out, you talk to the same turkey farmer, you see the turkeys and whatever, but you can capture something that's very sort of wonderful about human beings, which is the way that we talk and the way we interact. And there's just something, storytelling is a medium that's gone through all of human history, right? It's how we pass knowledge along to each other before we had written language and whatever. And there's just elements of the way people talk and their emotions, and there's so much wrapped up in the human voice that it's just, and it's like you almost get to meet these people in radio. It's fun, and they tell fun stories.
Say, oh, your bird's ready, and they'd say, okay, what do I owe you? I said, well, she's 43 pounds. And I say, 43 pounds? I don't want a 43-pound bird.
He had a problem with two big
I'd end up
turkeys.
stuck with maybe a half a dozen birds that were so big that you had to take a Sawzall and cut them in half and cook them sideways in the oven. Jeez, nobody wants that for Thanksgiving.
Especially not the turkeys. So, anyway, so we're going to talk about what we love about radio in addition, and I don't know what I had on that little speaker button. I better not click it because I have no idea what's there. And Paula's going to talk a little bit about radio.
Okay, why do we like radio? Why do we love it so much? I've been working on television, newspapers, magazines, websites, whatever, but radio is the medium that I love. And when I try to think, why do I love radio so much? Why do I like it so much? It is because radio is personal. It's totally personal. So radio relies on human voice to connect with the audience. And radio is about connection. People has to feel connected to yourself one way or another. That's why you listen to the radio. Do you listen to the radio? Do your father, your parents listen to the radio? Do you have a favorite radio or a favorite program? And when you try to remember that program, what do you remember? It is the voice of the person, yeah? You think you're kind of connected to that person. You kind of sort of identify with the person who is talking on the radio. Voices provide a personality with which audience can identify and connect. And if that voice doesn't have a personality, you don't get connected. You don't feel that that voice is talking to you, even if you can see that person and the person cannot see you. So back in the past, we used to look for very strong voices, most of them men, of course, to read the news. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like super big radio voice. It's kind of Chris Arnold voice.
We had an inappropriate name for that voice.
I really, well. But at some point on radio industry realized that people don't need to listen perfect voices. What they need are human voices. So even if you don't have a perfect voice, and there's no such a thing like a perfect voice, but even if your voice is like too nasal, or maybe pitch is too high, or whatever, all of you have perfect voices for the radio, because you love journalism, and probably you love to communicate to others. So all of you are perfect for the radio.
Except some of them might be terrible. We don't know.
Well, but I'm trying to encourage them.
No, you're all.
Best broadcasters are real. And we are all real people, we are all real human beings. But no, not all of us, we can show who we are on a radio. We can, if you want to connect your audience, you have to be real. It means that when you fake, they can notice. And I know it because when someone is telling me, when someone is talking to me and it's faking an emotion or faking like a feeling, I can notice that. I know you can notice that. So broadcasters have to be real. And to be real, you as a broadcaster, as a journalist, you need to feel like a commitment. You need to feel engaged with the things that you're trying to talk, with the stories that you're trying to tell, with the information you're trying to share. So that's another lesson. Best broadcasters are real.
And to make a point on that one too, even if you think I'm not going to be a radio reporter, I want to be a print reporter, I'm going to do it, I want to, that's what I'm into. A lot of print reporters come on the radio to talk. You have a big story, NPR calls you up, the BBC calls you up and says, hey, that's a great story. We want to do 4 minutes with you and Robert Siegel or Linda Wertheimer or whoever at the top of the hour. And maybe it's pre-recorded, maybe it's not, but it's got to be real tight and real together. And so it's good to know how to do that. And that's some of what we're going to talk about today is, okay, let's say you're a newspaper reporter, but you have to go on the radio. And part of it is being real. Like if you've written out a thing you're going to say, and a lot of people do this, it's like, okay, they're going to ask me A, B, C, D, and then I'm going to say this stuff and I'm going to read it. it sounds really bad because it sounds like you're reading and it should sound like you're talking. So there's some tricks like that. Just like public speaking, if you get up and you read every last line, it's a little less engaging than like me now, even though people are yawning, but that's okay. I don't take things like that
Personal.
personally. But anyway, so yeah, but just to back up the point, the best broadcasters are real.
Exactly. Radio is personal. We respond to the voices of presenters and news readers. And radio is a medium for one-to-one conversation. Now, the secret is, the magic of radio is, how can you have a one-to-one conversation when, if you're broadcasting the news, if you're like the news reader like I am basically locked inside a room, and I'm really locked inside because, there's no noise coming in, no noise coming out. So you're just alone. You think that you're alone. But then you start talking. You listen to your voice, you listen to yourself, and you start to think that you're talking to other people. And you try to imagine where these other people are, who they are. You have to imagine what are the things that they are interested in. Are they afraid? Do they feel secure? Do they feel happy or lost? I always remember I had to broadcast after an 8.8 earthquake in my country. You don't know what an 8.8 earthquake is, and I'm so happy that you don't know it because it's really huge. It's like the hugest earthquake ever recorded. So it was really, really huge. And then there was a tsunami. And then mobile phones were not working. Internet wasn't working. Internet, that was like the end of the world. There was, of course, no electricity, no light, and no one knew what to do. We were lost. And then you have to go on air. I go to the radio, light is on air, and you have to talk. What do you say? And you have to read real, and you have to remember that this is a one-to-one conversation. So what I did is I tried to connect with the way I was feeling. I was feeling kind of scared. I didn't know what was going on. But I was working. So I had this idea that we have to move on. We have to go on. We have to find our strengths. We have to recover. Okay, let's do it. And that's how you do it. So just one lesson, if you just need one lesson about radio, it's about engagement. It's about commitment. Share the stories that matter to you, and they will matter for people. That's what I do on the radio, at least.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from the storytelling guru, Ira Glass. Has anybody in this room not heard of Ira Glass? Okay, we're good.
Good.
So Ira, Ira is like a genius, like really. I think like his cousin or his like Philip Glass, where he's like the piano. I mean, the family's like just unbelievable, right? So he is an incredible storyteller. I think like people try to be like him a little too much. So then like if everybody ends up trying to sound like they're trying to sound like Ira Glass, it doesn't work so well. But he's amazing. So let's listen to what he has to say here. In theory, this will work.
I mean, one of the things I think is really important if you're making stories for television or radio is that you understand the building blocks of the stories. And there are different ways to think about this. One of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to think about it the way that you learned in high school, which is in high school, we're all taught that the way that you write is that there's like a topic sentence, and then there's like the facts which fill out the argument. In broadcasting, it's completely different. In broadcasting, I think you have two basic building blocks, and they're very powerful, and you can use them as you will. And one is the anecdote. And an anecdote is literally just a sequence of actions. If you think of it as just like what is a story in its purest form? A story in its purest form is somebody saying, this happened, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing, like one thing following another. And some of the things in the sequence can be, and that made me think of this, and then I said this. Like there could be thoughts and ideas as part of it, but like one is leading to the next, leading to the next. And the power of the anecdote is so great that no matter how, in a way, like no matter how boring the material is, if it's in a story form where there's an anecdote happening, and then he said this to me, and then I went here, and then I came downstairs, and I thought, like, what the hell? Like, it has a momentum in and of itself that no matter how boring the facts are, like I'm trying to think like the most.
This is really
like,
good.
Okay, this part trying to think like the most boring possible story. Okay, there's a guy, and he wakes up and And he's lying in bed, and the house is very, very quiet, just unearthly quiet. And so he sits up, and he puts his feet on the floor, and he walks to the door of his bedroom. And again, just very, very quiet. Walks down the stairs, looks around, just unusually quiet. Now, like, this is the most, like, what I'm telling you is the most boring possible fact. There's suspense in it. It feels like something's going to happen. And the reason why is because literally it's a sequence of events. Like, this guy's doing this thing, he's moving from space to space. You can feel through its form that when you have one thing leading to the next, leading to the next, you can feel inherently that you're on a train that has a destination and that he's going to find something.
And so, I mean, some of what I was talking about here is just good writing. You know, I mean, this is, if you've taken writing classes, it's similar. I mean, you're taking, you're moving the plot forward, something's happening. The other thing he's doing, though, if you listen to the way he was talking in the first half of that, and the way he started to talk once he started telling the story, and what he's doing with his voice is all of a sudden he's really telling a story. And then this is what he's a genius at. I mean, just like, a guy wakes up in bed, nothing's going on, he walks downstairs. But the way he's able to pause, where he pauses, his intonation, his voice gets quiet, you're like completely drawn into that story. And like when I heard that when I was putting together a talk, I don't know, 6 months ago, for weeks afterwards, I kept thinking about that guy. And I'm like, so what happened to that guy when he went downstairs? Like, he's just really, really good at it. But there's elements of voice that in writing and in speaking that if you can play with and get good at, they're very powerful as far as drawing people into stuff. So
I was thinking about the way he poses, because when you start talking on the radio, and if you have to, I mean, maybe some of you have been on the radio, but you are so scared of running out of words. You know, I will not know what to say. But if you listen to Ira, it is so important when you make a pause, and maybe you make a pause because you didn't know what to say, or you get lost, or whatever. But the effect of the pause is very dramatic. You see? So every time you don't know what to say, just pause. Because it will have an effect and it will give you time to think.
Let's see if we can get this to work again.
And the house is very, very quiet. Just
if you listen.
Like, okay, anecdote happening. And then he said this to me, and anecdote happening. And then he said this to me, and then I went here, and then I came downstairs, and I thought, like, what the hell?
See, there he's not really doing it.
It has a momentum in and of itself that no matter how boring the facts are, like I'm trying to think like them,
but like here, okay, this part, just listen to where he pauses, how he gets quiet.
And he wakes up and he's lying in bed, and the house is very, very quiet, just unearthly quiet. And so he sits up.
That was a long pause. He's just.
And he puts his feet on the floor, and he walks to the door of his bedroom, and again, just very, very quiet. Walks down the stairs, looks around. Just unusually quiet. Now,
and there's repetition, and he's doing a lot of stuff. But anyway, you don't have to go into all of it. But I mean, you can just get the sense that you can get really good at writing, and it's true for writing too. I mean, you use repetition, writing, whatever else. But just the craft of this is important. So anyway,
it's not just about talking. That's the main idea.
It's not just going blah blah blah.
It's not just blah 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 blah. All I know, all I can say.
Right, and we'll get back to that too. If you do get called up by the BBC, or if you're in Europe or NPR here, and they ask you to go on and talk, the trap is to just do that, to be like, oh, I'm on the radio, I can't stop talking, And the best thing to do is to pause, collect your thoughts, think about what you're going to say. When you pause, people think that you're thinking.
Not that you're lost.
Not that you're lost. And so.
That you didn't get it. Or that you didn't.
Yeah, they think something's coming, so it draws them in. And if you just keep talking forever without a break, people space out. So that's, something to think about. I think I have to click off of this
for the next.
I think I have to get out of that little window there we go. Okay, so this is the part we're going to talk about next. So the radio station calls you up. We've talked about this a little bit. How do you do it? And there's sort of two different ways this can happen. One is that you got 4 minutes to be on All Things Considered, and you got to say it really concisely, and you've got just 4 questions, and whatever. Or you might be on a talk show for an hour with these guys, or Paula. And I think what we were going to do, have Paula talk about what it's like when you go on for an hour? And to me, this is the easier thing. It sounds like, oh my God, I'm on for an hour, versus 4 minutes. Hey, 4 minutes. 4 minutes is way harder than an hour. It's like the Mark Twain thing. I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long letter, because it's much tougher to do the concise, well put together thing. And I think it's also very relaxing. You go on for an hour, you can just sort of talk. If you say something wrong, you can say it again. But why don't you go ahead, talk about what it's like to be on a talk show, and we can play Kareem's thing.
Okay, so let's talk about being invited. Have you ever invited to the radio yet? No? No one?
Yeah, has anybody in here been on there? Oh, okay.
Okay, and
Maybe we can see, so what were you doing? What was that like? You have to? So maybe we could do you want to stand up and say what you did?
Sure. They managed to reach me over the phone. They were interviewing me about a legal case I was involved in. I was a street performer being sued for $100,000 by another street performer at the time. It was something of an oddity.
Who is that? Who called you?
These obnoxious DJs in New Hampshire. They were really trying to phase me, I think, and get me to say something inappropriate. They were very tickled by the fact that I had accused another street performer of sexual harassment in a town full of gay men, so they cracked a bunch of homophobic jokes and then moved on to the misogyny, and I just tried to stay chill throughout it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I don't know what lessons are to be drawn there, except that you try to figure out. Yeah, right. Figure out who's inviting you on the radio. You don't have to go, right? You can just say,
First lesson.
In my opinion, I thought that I did have to go because any publicity is good publicity when you're trying to make a living as an artist, but I think it's very important to be unflappable, and I'm not sure how you teach that as a skill.
Yeah, or just to be ready. I mean, certainly prepare yourself for what you're getting into and know. Okay, are these guys super nice guys? And you're going on NPR, you're going on Fox News, you're going on, Sam and Jerry's crazy, offensive morning show or whatever. So
Sam and Jerry's offensive crazy morning.
But how did you deal with it? What did you do?
There were one or two questions that I said I can't answer that. There were one or two times that they cracked jokes and I was pointedly not laughing. But I mean, for the most part, I just, it really was about being unflappable. I mean, it really was about just pretending not to notice that anyone was trying to get a rise out of me and just answering questions as directly as I could.
But probably people who were listening noticed that. People are really smart. People may have noticed that you were uncomfortable. And that's a message. If that was the message that you wanted to send, you
Probably.
did it.
Well, I think to some extent that I'm comfortable with people noticing I was uncomfortable in that situation, yes. I just didn't want people to hear me getting angry, so it was important to not.
To that, yes. That very interesting experience. Thanks for sharing. And I think there's one lesson here.
Yeah, and if you come on NPR too, we won't be mean to you.
No, I don't do that kind of thing either. But I think that there was something important. And I am telling you this secret as a host of our daily live news radio program. You don't have to answer the question that they are presenting you. If you don't agree with the question, if you don't agree with the words in the question, or if you have another message which is more important for you, just say what is important for you. I shouldn't be saying that because I will try to make my question. But I think as an interview, or when you have the chance point of being listened by a lot of people, so have a clear message and express your message. No matter what they ask you, you always can manage to say what you want. Because what happened is that when we're interviewed, we go there and we say, oh, I didn't say, have you had this feeling? I didn't say what I wanted to say. Or, but what I really wanted to.
They didn't ask me this question.
Okay, no matter what, you say what you want to say.
Yeah.
That's a golden lesson. If you find a very, I don't know, you can have a smart conversation with the presenter, but just say what you want to say.
And politicians do this all the time, right? I mean, every time when you interview a politician as a professional reporter, you might ask them 10 different things, but usually, I mean, depending on the situation, but they may have one thing they really want to say, and no matter what the questions are, they're going to make sure they say that 3 times, and and get it in. And that's sort of okay, you can be cynical, but I could turn it around, and now you're the reporter, and you know your story better than the host does. So even if it's not Sam and Dave's stupid morning radio show, if it's Robert Siegel on NPR, if he's asking you the wrong questions, it's sort of an art, or a question you don't know the answer to. I mean, either way, you can steer it. You can move it around. It's like, well, what's really most important here is this thing, and you could just say that, or whatever. Find a way to segue from what they're asking you into what is the most important thing to talk about. So that's it.
It's not about lying. It's not about,
Right.
truth is the most important thing in journalism. It's not trying to avoid things that you don't like. It's about having a clear message and knowing that you will only have a few minutes to say that message. So if you think it is important, just go with it. Any other experience? Someone else went to the radio. You went, Bobby?
Yeah.
And how was it?
Sorry.
How could you describe it?
I was on BBC and NPR early February talking about the cheating scandal at Harvard after the results sort of came out.
Oh, cool.
Not quite the same experience. It was much more just straightforward answering news questions.
But anyway, it was the issue was a delicate issue.
Yeah, it was a delicate issue.
And how did it go? Like, did you, like one thing we're going to say, did you give them questions to ask you, or did you not know what they were going to ask you?
I didn't know what they were going to ask, but I basically knew what I was comfortable talking about, which is what we had written, and wasn't going to say much more than that. And was sort of like going to spin questions, basically.
Yeah,
to get there. Yeah.
And how did it go? Was it over? Was it fun, or was it like, oh my God, I'm on the radio, or what was it? Was it like a
It
cool
was
thing?
fun. Yeah.
That's good.
Any bad experience on the radio? And thank you so much.
Well, there was one other. Who else was on the radio? You were going to say?
Well, the same story
Oh, okay.
back in, I guess in August when it first broke, and I was managing editor of the Crimson at the time and was also talking about the cheating scandal on a British radio station, so it's not terribly different. I think the takeaway for me was it is very different to be interviewed live than to be interviewed for a newspaper.
And the BBC is probably a little, NPR is a little friendlier. The BBC can be like, well, it's Harvard, isn't it? So all you cheating should be cheating, Harvard. Was it a little more edgy or not really?
They were pretty friendly.
They were pretty friendly. Okay.
We're very friendly.
No. I'm saying in the BBC, which is good. I wish, I think it's good. They push people. It's kind of fun. But anyway, so very cool. Did you have any other kind of takeaways from it other than? Did you feel like there was something that could have gone differently, or no? Overall, it was just good.
I basically just jumped off a train in order to be. I was supposed to be in a quiet place, of course, for an interview that has to do with sound, and my train had been delayed, and so I just got off at an earlier stop and stood up high on a hill trying to get away from the train noises, which I think was obviously not ideal, but that was another good thing to think about, how where you are matters a lot more.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like think about it before your dog starts barking when you're trying to do that.
Yeah, if you're talking about reporters here, like when you're a reporter and you have to call to the radio because they will put you on air from the telephone. Yes, you have to think about where I am. Thank you so much, Evan. You have to think where I am, who is coming in, where's the dog, where are the kids, and where are mothers, okay? And try to be brief. Something that we used to do is like when we know that someone will interview us or will ask us about anything, we start to Google all around. Have you tried? We Google everything, and then we have a lot of information. But radio is basically like a 3-4 minutes exercise. So you just have to have very few strong sentences, very clear sentences. You will not have time to say all the things that you want to do, that you want to say. So do not over Google it. Just keep. How do you say? Just write to the facts.
Be specific. Yeah, I think
short phrases.
Yeah,
here are some tips.
The short interviews are the harder ones. That's where you hop on for 4 minutes and it has to be together, especially if it's live. So, what we do at NPR is we write the questions for the host. You know more than they do.
I will never accept that.
Well, the host changes the questions.
The host do whatever.
Yeah, the host might
wants.
think they have better questions than you have, so they're going to change them. But
it is good if you want to.
No, it's good because then the host at least sees what you think are the most. And most people wouldn't get. It's like it's helpful. It's like, oh, this is what I can really talk to. They can ask you whatever they want, but why not do that? It really helps you. So And make sure the host actually gets them. A radio show, especially a live one, there's like 30 people running in different directions and everything's going crazy. And it's not impolite to push on the producer who you're talking to, in your headset or over the phone to say, hey, can you just make sure the host got my questions? Because I just want them to know what I can talk about. So that's a little tip. Okay, so let's say you got 4 minutes. That means 3 or 4 questions. Only try to say one thing in answer to one question, which sounds simple. But if you start to get real complicated and trying to explain it's like use images, use very simple metaphors. If it gets jargony, you just lose people. They're gone. So try to keep it straightforward. Try not to say too much. And bullet points are good. So again, not reading. If the things you want to hit on are we don't know if the basketball players are going to play this season or not. We don't know how many students were cheating, and we don't even know if they were cheating. I don't know, I'm making this up. But okay, those are your bullet points, and just make sure you kind of hit on those, or whatever. And make sure you give yourself time to exhale. So some people get on and they're totally unflappable and they just talk on the radio and everything's cool and it's fine. If you're talking on the radio and you're starting to get nervous and you're like, holy crap, I'm live on the radio and my mother's listening and there's 1 million people and it's all over the country, the tendency can be to just start talking faster and really keep talking and my mom's on the radio and she's listening to me and I'm going to still keep talking and then, oh my God, I'm totally running out of breath and I'm totally not breathing at all and I'm still talking and something bad's going to happen. So just pause and exhale. And it's another funny thing too. Some of it's or you keep taking breaths in. This will happen. Our public speaking teacher was talking about this. It's just the way the body reacts to being in this situation. You're kind of in fight or flight if you get anxious in a public speaking situation. So it's the same thing with the radio. Breathe out. Just stop talking, breathe, and take in a breath and keep talking. And if you just it sounds stupid, but if you get nervous, sometimes you will just get all bollocksed up with the way you're breathing, and kind of remembering to exhale is a good little thing that can work.
That leads us to voice. Voice is breathe. That's what voice is about. It's about breathing. So I will share with you some tips that work for me. It doesn't mean that's the only way to do this thing, but it works for me, so I will share to you. So first of all, you have to think when you speak that you don't need no excess throat or muscle tension. It means you cannot talk if your throat is closed. And so let's try to relax your throat. Let's try to make this exercise because you've been sitting here too long. So let's try to move this throat. You think that to talk, in order to speak, you don't need your body, but it's about your body. It's about breathing and moving. So let's try to move this throat. If you're like that, you cannot talk. You cannot talk because you're so nervous. And it can happen, even if you're very self-assured, you get nervous. So relax your throat.
Yeah, and that's true, stretch out your chest and your shoulders and move your head around
It's good. It works.
Just kind of physically relax some of your muscles, and that will physically relax your voice when you're going to go on the radio.
Okay, so breathe.
They don't do it for half an hour, but a couple of minutes.
Okay, here we go with the tips. If your voice sounds too thin, too high-pitched, sometimes women have this feeling that we're too high-pitched. Did it ever happen to you that someone record you on a video or something for the family, and then you listen or you see, that's not me? Okay, the same thing happens with your voice. That's not my voice. Why is it a horrible voice? So, if your voice sounds for you too high-pitched for your taste, it is because of your throat. Probably it's because of your throat. It's too much tension. You're too nervous, and you're like this. So your voice starts to go. When you fight, when you have an argument, and I sometimes, boyfriends, girlfriends, and you start, arguing about something like the movie that we're going to see tonight, and then you start to go up because you're so upset. So always remember, going down, not too much tension on your throat. Other problem. If your voice sounds, for your taste, too flat, like it's not protected, like people can hear you, like people say, what? Maybe it is because you need more breath. That's what happened that Chris was describing, no? So If you think that when people say to you, I can hear you, or what did you say? I mean, not because your English is not that good, which is my case, but when you're perfectly speaking and people say, what? It is probably because you need to breathe. So let's move to the other slide, the next slide, please, my helper. Voice is supported by lower breathing muscles in abdomen. So what's important thing, okay? You speak from here to here, and mostly with your abdomen. Okay, that's where voice comes from. That's where breathing comes from. So remember, it's not about your throat. It's not about your mouth. A little bit, we'll talk about it, but it's about breathing with your whole body. Speaking is a physical activity. Don't let your throat do all of the work. Speak from your abdomen, okay? So if you want to broadcast, I will tell you, when I go every day, I go to a radio, you know, and I have this chair. And when I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, I'm just relaxed, you know? And I always write my name. I am Paula Molina. I know my name, but I have to write it. I know most of radio broadcasters do that. But when I go in there, you stand up, you grow, center, and you speak. That's how you do it. So you have to be centered, like the right attitude. So could we try the attitude to speaking? If you were about to speak, you're ready. On air. 5, 4, 3. Okay, center, perfect. Okay, well, you cannot be tweeting. I tweet when I'm broadcast, but don't worry. Okay, loosen up before speaking. What we were doing, move your shoulders, move your neck.
And I think we should all say, I am Paula Molina. I think that would be good.
We'll try that. Okay. You can say, I am Chris Arnold. So, very important. Have you noticed, you don't have to answer, but do you sing in the shower? Have you noticed what beautiful voice in the shower? That's perfect. It is because in the shower you're relaxed and your muscles are very relaxed. That's why your voice sounds so beautiful in the shower, because you are relaxed. But then you get out of the shower and you're in a hurry, and then your voice is not beautiful anymore.
And the acoustics are good in the shower.
Yeah, well, that's very good. And a lot of and then something very important. Okay, let's go. It's not about your jaw and your mouth, but it plays a role. So you have to move your mouth. And we don't do that. Sometimes we speak like that because we're kind of tired. You cannot do that. So you open your mouth. Can you open your mouth for me? Move your jaw. Okay? Okay. Not too much. Because, okay? You move your mouth. And the super secret trick that I would share for free, but every time you're going to for free, you have to do this, which is like a long. Okay, let's do it. You can do it. You will be the same one. You won't lose your dignity. And now we are talking. Okay, these are basic things.
Yeah, and there's different ones. I mean, if you actually get into broadcasting, there's different things you can say. Like, you want to get your P sounds warmed up. So, like, you guys are too young to remember this, but there was an ad on the radio, like, picky people pick Peter Pan peanut butter, it's the peanut butter picky people pick. And then you try to say that, like, really fast. So anyway, there's different things you can say.
Yes,
like,
but all those things work.
Yeah.
I mean, they really make you speak in a better way, and people will understand. Because that's the point, no? The point is not for people to say, oh, such a beautiful voice. The point is for people to say, oh, such an interesting story you're telling me today. So that's about voice training tips. Oh, know your range. This is very important. If you're the kind of people who has anyone does yoga? Raise your hands. The yoga people knows everything about it, so you don't need. You know how to breathe and other stuff. Use those skills. Know your range. You have let's go back to that video that your mama did of you, and you sound so awful, and you don't want to see it anymore because it's okay. So try to know your voice. Know your voice. And to know your voice, you have to find which is your right pitch. And what can be useful is to, because that's your natural thing. So try to just do it. Okay, this is your natural. So, okay, there you have it. This is where you have to go with your voice. Okay? This is the tone that you have to find because it's comfortable for you. So try to find it. Try not too high and not too bad. Try to go where you feel comfortable.
And do you think some women, like it's said, like people at NPR years ago, will try to push their voice lower than it should be just to try to sound more like, try to sound like men. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because in the 70s or 80s, I don't know, it was like people, whatever. But now you don't have to do that. Just it should be your voice. Don't like push it down or slam it up or whatever.
Exactly. And record. Record yourself. Listen to yourself. Most of us, we never recorded. I mean, the first time I went to a radio and I listened to myself, I couldn't believe it. Oh, this is horrible. But you get used to your voice. When you record it and you listen again, you start to know your song. You start to know your voice. And I say you start to know your song. Because when we speak, we sing. And there are many words that we always use. And there are, which is your favorite word? The word that you repeat. You don't have one?
Well, I do all kinds of stuff. Like
Okay, so that's how you, that's the thing that I do. I didn't know it. I do like, I cannot share it. I do something like, and then I stop. But because I recorded it and I realized it, I change it. So try to find what is the word that you always use or that thing that you do when you try to think, all those
it could
things.
be, yeah, right, something like that. You mean like?
All that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Sometimes we have like a song, like we go up at the end of the phrase, or we go down at the end of the phrase.
Oh, you're talking about, okay, so some of this is like patterns. Again, we're probably getting a little more advanced than we need to be since nobody's like broadcasting all the time. But yeah, you do, because sometimes you do have to read stuff, right? If you're being interviewed, don't read. But if you're like a radio reporter, you have to read because you wrote it, your editor edited it, and the trick is how to read without sounding like really boring like you're reading. And people can fall into patterns where they start emphasizing every fifth word because, I can't really do it, but
but we do that kind of thing.
Yeah, you do it like da 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 da, and that pattern, if it gets uninterrupted, will just put people to sleep, or ending every sentence with an up and stuff like that. So you want to avoid, but I don't know, that might be a little farther down the road.
Okay, but so first thing, just record yourself, be strong enough to listen to yourself, and know your voice, and try to go to the voice that you would really like to have.
And I like this one too, the short, simple sentences.
Oh, this is about attitude. This is going back to our first slide. Attitude. Talk personally. Talk to particular individuals. Talk to persons. This is one-to-one. Try to find what do we have in common, me and the ones who are listening to me. Be conversational. That's the way we say. Mm-hmm. Be relaxed on the radio. Use short and simple sentences and get straight to the point. Don't pack too much information. So being simple is being beautiful. It's really hard, but it's worth it.
And I think
I
we
have 15 minutes for collecting audio, maybe?
I was going to play one other thing. That was Kareem. Let me just play one other thing. Let me see what this is.
Gasoline is above 3.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so the other thing I like about radio, I mean, you should also have fun with radio. It can be very fun, and it's like people interacting together. And what I like too, if you do go out and start, whether it's for video or radio or whatever, what can be kind of fun is people's real human interactions with each other. So something you can't really capture in print. I mean, you can do dialogue between two people, but you lose a lot of the humanness of it. I mean, you can write it very well, and I mean, not to say, but if you can capture real surprising moments, I mean, Ira Glass talks about this, it's like, or you can capture somebody actually reacting to something you say. I mean, we're all wired to want to experience that. So, and then this, an editor asked me to go out and do a story about high gas prices like years ago, and I was like, come on, man, that's like such a lame story. It's like all the local news had pictures of like, it's just like, it's boring, I don't want to do it. And he's like, you have to go do the high gas price story. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go do it. But so this was one way, because I also thought like we were making way too much about high gas prices. It's like, there are much bigger problems in the universe. But anyway, so this is what I came up with.
Gasoline is above $3 a gallon again, and many Americans are grumbling at the pump. But news coverage of gas prices can be more dramatic than the prices themselves. NPR's Chris Arnold reports that the recent uptick may look and sound like an economic calamity, but most drivers aren't letting prices get in their way.
High gas prices. The pain at the pump is ruining your life. Well, okay, it's not. We can turn off the music and stuff. Turn it off.
It's really not hurting that much yet.
To talk about what's really going on with gas prices, I met up with Nieman Fellow at a gas station in Lexington, Massachusetts. He's chief economist at Global Insight, an economic forecasting firm. But as we get talking here, the gas station owner, Paul Molina, comes over to tell us what he thinks.
If apples could fly, this place would be an airport.
Molina says he's sick of watching people come out of Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks up the street with coffee and bags of pricey snacks, and then pull in here and complain about high gas prices.
Go over there. They're all coming out with lattes, mates, $4.50, worth of coffee. Do the math on a martini, 7 to 12. What do you get, 4 ounces in it? It's probably, I don't know, do the math. It's probably $500 for a gallon of martini.
Molina walks off to his little mini-mart disgusted, leaving me and Bearvesh standing out by the pumps.
But he has a point, right? He's absolutely right. People are people are willing to pay these outrageous prices for, lattes and bottles of wine, but we get all worked up because of $3 gas. And now, mind you, we use more gas than we do coffee.
But I don't know. I mean, if you're commuting, 20 minutes to work and you go in and you buy a cup of coffee and a muffin and, when you go out to lunch, you're spending a lot more money day to day on just little food items than you are.
And that's exactly the point. We are, in terms of food bought away from home, that's a huge part of the budget these days, much, much bigger than gasoline.
Bearvesh says how much people make and what they spend it on has changed a lot since gas prices
So you can hear it's like the whole story's being told. Half the story is just me talking to this guy,
Gasoline prices have risen about
which
130%
is better than the.
And that sounds like a big number, except the take-home pay has gone up 340%.
And then we weaved in some actual statistics, but it's kind of within the.
Sure, gasoline prices are up, and up a lot. We shouldn't belittle the fact. So it's all relative.
Government figures show that in 1980, Americans on average spent 5% of their income filling up their gas tanks. Today, that figure is just 2/3 of that, 3.5%. Still, gas is
There's one more guy I want to get to in the story.
It's a lot of money.
Retiree Robert Bartlett has just pumped $37 of unleaded into his car.
I'm a retired clergy. It is a lot of money.
I mean, it's a lot of money, but you're driving a very nice Cadillac. You got the Cadillac baseball cap.
Right. The Cadillac is a used car.
Bartlett at first says he might need to cancel a vacation or something because of the cost of gas, but when he thinks it over, he admits that probably won't happen. And so far, he says he's been driving just as much as usual all over New England.
I have to see my friends. I have to do something. I cannot lie dormant because someone decides to up on the gas. I'll figure something out like everyone else.
After the
Anyway, and what I like about that is too, as a reporter, okay, you go out to do the gas prices story, and you go to the gas pump, and somebody's going to tell you oh, it's terrible. I'm not going to go on vacation. This is so terrible. And then you're like, come on, you're really not going to go on vacation? It's like people will tell you what they think you want to hear, or they just get a little more dramatic. And then you're like, all right, no, come on, give me an example. Like a vacation you're planning, you're actually canceling your vacation. And he's like, no, I'm not canceling my vacation. I can't lie dormant, and it's like, and then you get this great, better story if you challenge people a little bit.
Okay.
I shouldn't have let that go on so long, but I like this one.
Okay, and that's it. I don't know if you have, because we just have a few minutes. So if you have any question that we can answer,
Oh yeah,
it'll be
where are we
great.
here? We've got. Oh yeah, well yeah. So questions and. Do you guys want to know about different microphones or how you use a microphone or what kind of questions would you guys have at this point?
So you mentioned the influx of journalists coming from print into NPR just because radio has been relatively stable the past few years. And I'm curious about how people have to adjust their journalism styles once they, how they report specifically, not just adjusting the voice and learning how to talk on the radio. And I guess a related question is, the fact that listeners can't skim a piece the way they can skim an article, and how you deal with that.
Well, the last one I'll take first. You have to go shorter. I mean, since listeners can't skim, everything is like 4 minutes or shorter on NPR, with some exceptions if they're going to do a big blowout story. Like that gas prices thing was like 3.5, 4 minutes or something. So you have to get used to writing shorter. And at first, they were pushing us in this direction too. And I remember 10, 15 years ago, people being like, I need 12 minutes for my story about badgers, or something. And it's like, well, there's other stories we got to get on. And I think you could do a lot in 4 minutes. You could say, and it's like, do another story in 2 days if you want to talk more about it or something. But like, so you can't do the like super long format narrative, like Pulitzer thing. So that's one thing to kind of get used to. And you can do projects, and you can do, especially on the web, you can do bigger blowout stuff on the web that's got a lot more information. But different people make the transition differently. I've got an editor, Marilyn G-Wax at NPR. She was with the Atlanta paper, but she was based in DC for a long time, and she was a great writer. Came in and immediately started like hopping on, doing live interviews on the radio shows. She was writing stories. She's a great, just naturally great radio editor. Other people struggle with it a little more, but I don't think I've seen hardly anybody come in who couldn't do it. I mean, it's like, if you want to do it and you're motivated, you just, it's like carpentry or anything else. You just kind of tag along with the radio reporter and do it, learn how to do what they're doing. So. Sure.
From the perspective of people that are like asking the questions during an interview, do you have any advice for how to get the most out of the subject that you're interviewing? How to get like interesting information from them?
Oh yeah. So first of all, if you're in the news every day, that's the best way to prepare an interview. You will get nothing from a last-minute Google reading instance about someone. You have to be on the news every day. But I'm sure that you're ready to do that. So that's the source of your strength, that you know what's going on, that you know what's important for people. And that's the base for your interview. And then you have to go to the point, and you have to listen to the people you are interviewing. That's key. Because some of us, we start making an interview, and we're so worried about the next question that we are not listening. And the best, people, it's not that hard to get something interesting from your interviewer. You just have to listen to them. When we say, I always think there is a very basic trick for politicians, which is at some point in the interview, you ask, which is the price of the bread? Which is the price of milk? Just that, if he hesitates, or if she hesitates, you have something. So it's not about preparing very complex questions. It's about having the right questions. In my case, I try not to overshow. Some journalists take a lot of time to craft the question, and then the other people say, the one that you're interviewing say yes or no, and you have nothing. So you have to be brief. That's the way I like it. Be brief, short, sharp, and listen. And never ever, this is my last trick.
Good job.
Another trick for free. Always never ever stop looking at him or her in the eyes, because when you're looking at someone, it's like that you have to tell them the truth. If I'm looking at you, you feel like, okay, but if I'm interviewing you and I'm looking at I'm trying to think of my questions and I'm looking at the producer, you can get away with any kind of answer. So those are my tricks. Those are the things that I use.
I would adjust that last one a little bit, because if you're talking to somebody for 40 minutes and you're staring at them like this the whole time,
well.
It's going to freak them out.
Oh, it's not that bad.
I'm just saying, I understand. But but maybe for a very important question, you want to look at them. Just kind of see what they're looking like while they're answering. I actually, if you're in a long interview, I do kind of like to look away at the counter and kind of, because it gives them a break, it gives me a break, and you kind of, okay, they said this interesting thing, I'm going to take note. I think it's easy when you start out as a reporter to get overwhelmed before an interview. It's like, oh my God, there's all these different questions I could ask, and I don't know, do I have all the bases covered?
And where are my batteries and where
are my batteries and everything else? At this point, interviews are are relaxing to me. It's like a chance to talk to somebody. And I kind of know, if you know like one or two things you think you need from this guy or this woman for your story, you get better at being like, okay, well, here's how they're going to fit into the puzzle, you know. And that's not to say you've totally pre-thought it out, because you also want to be open. But it's like, okay, I want him to say something like this, and I want him to say something like this.
Oh, yeah.
And then so you ask a couple of questions to get that along the way somewhere. And then the rest of it's just an interesting conversation. And that gives you the freedom to really listen. And it's like, okay, then if they start saying something that's unexpected, you can chase them down that rabbit hole and see where it goes. And then maybe you've got some second story, some other story. Also, a little trick, another free tip from me, is at the end of an interview, I always ask, you know, is there anything I didn't ask you that you think is important, you know, and sometimes, you know, if they kind of look at me blankly, I might be like, well, you know, or even if you're walking around the backyard with the dog and the moon's out and you're thinking about life, you know, and, you know, I don't know, like, but what would be sort of the most personally poignant part of this whole thing, whatever it is to you? And half the time they're like, I don't fucking know. And then, but the other half the time they're like, you will get an amazing quote, or just, they'll just start talking and they'll be like, well, geez, whew, my wife, she's telling me, oh, what's that thing? And then it's like, then you get all this good stuff. So I think that's just a good little way to end interviews, because it also leaves it open to the notion that, you know,
I think that I'm talking about live interviews, like 7 minutes live interviews, and you're talking more about the kind of interviews that you
You're in
do
the field
to prepare on the field, to prepare like a. But always think about quotes. That's very good. Think about the phrases, the sentences. When someone says something that makes sense to you, go for it. Any other questions?
oh, and then,
He's calling.
I was going to, you said at the beginning that the internet didn't necessarily destroy radio as it did print news, and I was wondering where you see the future of radio going and what possibilities you see for radio on the internet.
I think there's huge possibility. We already are all over the internet, and not just with news. Like, I think the NPR music site is phenomenal. And it's like I have 2 kids. It's like the only thing that keeps me kind of hip, like a little bit, because like I'll go there and they've just got great. It's like, oh, the Decemberists, they're pretty cool, man. And like, and oh, you know, those other top 5 bands I can't remember. But they're, and like, it's great. And I've actually been listening to Radio France, where you just download the app and then you can click and you can listen to what they're playing in Paris, and it's like totally cool. So that does create a little more competition. But also a lot more opportunity. I mean, it's like most people who listen to NPR, before it was just all things considered morning edition news, you know, and the stations would carry some classical music and stuff. But I think we have anything that goes in your ear, I think we could do really, really well. Like, that's our strong suit. And like the BBC, you know, recorded the Beatles and did stuff like that, right? So I think we could be doing a lot more music-related stuff and arts-related stuff. And we have a million channels we could use. I want to get him with my laser pointer because he's sleeping. Oh, no, it's okay. No, it's okay. I'm just joking.
Arnold.
I was sleeping. I was going to get him with the thing.
The thing is that we have, I think digital offer us much more opportunities as radio broadcasters, a world of opportunities.
Yeah.
And they kind of alike social media and radio. It's about being brief, being sharp, being committed, being engaged. So I think it's kind of the same thing.
So, yeah. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in the radio. And competition. We got to stay on our toes, right? Because I can listen to Radio France, and then I'm not listening to NPR.
You're listening to Radio France.
Yeah, because Kareem it was amazing.
So kind of along the lines of that, like podcast now or something that we're obviously here that weren't here, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
How has that changed the field? Because you can easily go and download 20 chapters, podcast episodes of something versus a radio piece.
I think it's great for us because those are just new ways to distribute your content.
Yeah.
So for me, it is the same old game. Try to create the best possible content and try to share it by all the possible ways. And before we were kind of locked on radio, but now we have a lot of different channels, podcasts and Twitter, and we can move. It's like the human voice, lucky for us, is very easy to move. So I think those are great.
Yeah, and I think it's tough to do a really good podcast. I mean, it's like before in the old world, before podcasting, it's like, okay, well, I could listen to NPR, or I could go to the video store. There's like 100 different thousand videos I could watch, right? And maybe you're not going to be doing them exactly the same time, but Or I could just be listening to music in my Walkman, or something. But like, so yes, there are options, but I just think it's all new delivery channels, like you said. And for us, we can do really good podcasts, and if anybody else wants to come along and try to do a really good podcast, that's great. But it's pretty tough to do something that's really good, so we'll see how much competition there actually is. I know like New York Times tried to do one, and it was pretty bad, like it didn't work, because that's not what they do. They don't do radio, they don't do audio stuff. Maybe they'll get better at it and will be more competition, but so far it's,
And it's 12:30 and you have to
have lunch,
so if you have one question.
So if you want to take a few more questions, it's fine. I actually wanted to ask you a question which has come up in previous conferences. A lot of the college students have to deal with administrators who don't want to give straight answers and are like politicians in a way. So how do you get an answer from somebody who doesn't want to give you an answer?
Does that happen to you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
That's funny. Well, it's good practice. It's good practice for interviewing
Other thing
politicians.
that politicians don't answer what they ask?
Yeah, like even you'll ask them, so how did this cheating thing happen? What the hell's going on? And they'll just say something bland or whatever, right?
Did you say like it depends?
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay.
That happens to me every day.
Here's one thing I would say. And this is kind of related to something Bill Merimo told me years ago. And Bill Merimo has won like 2 Pulitzer Prizes, the best editor I've ever worked with. And he said, look, if you know you're going to be covering a company or a government agency or something like that, get a relationship with them. Do stories. Go do some stories that are good stories, but that they're also going to like. Like, you don't have to be attacking this organization all the time. There's plenty of stories to do that are not, negative. And, there's no harm in kind of balancing it out. And then when a story comes along that is difficult, you have a relationship to where you can be like, look, I'm not quoting you. I just want to talk. And they like you, they know you, and then you can understand what's really going on and where they're coming from, and then work out, okay, well, what can I actually quote you on? Or you could just get the real stuff, and then once you have the real stuff, then you can figure out, okay, so now I have the real stuff. How can I get the real stuff into my article? And sometimes you can't because they put on background, but there's usually a way, like, well, what if I attribute this to, someone in the administration or sources close to the administration, or, and if suppose you come back with the one thing, I just want to say this. I thought this was really interesting, what you said when we were on background. Is there any way I can just get that into my story? And then you can get past some of the, PR speak that you're stuck with some of the time. Does that make sense to people? Is that?
Yes, that happened to me. I don't have that chance because I'm live every day, so it's like I interview someone every day, so I don't have that chance of building like a long relationship. But what I do when I know that someone is trying to avoid my question is that it's funny because it's the simple things that work. Repeat the question. And when the person, it's always a man, I don't know why, but and when he said to me, I already answered you, you say, no, you didn't. So what is your question? This is my question. And he'll say, well, sometimes they don't answer. But it is true that sometimes they will not answer.
Them for not answering.
But people will know that they didn't answer. And that's true.
Yeah. And you could do that in print too if you do a Q&A thing.
But the thing is, insist. I think that's the key. Insist. If you know that they are not answering you, just insist. I'm repeating my question.
If you don't have a good if you have a good relationship, I think you don't really want to piss them off. You want to have access, and you want to. If you have access and you can tell the real story without quoting the guy, great. If there's just being the guy's being a total jerk and isn't giving you anything.
No, but these guys are really mean people. We're talking about mean people here who don't want to answer us. We're going to them. And then you jump in the neck and you don't. No, really, you go. That's what I do. Yes. So people say, oh, you're like a fighter. Well, sometimes. But you just go. Because they will answer at the end. And if they don't, people will know that they didn't. That's what I do. Any other question? A final question before lunch? Or during a rush?
So this actually strikes me as pretty relevant for both radio and print, but in radio, it's especially important that people say quotes as articulately as possible. And then, so how do you work on getting the best quotes possible from whoever you're interviewing?
First lesson to try to close our, it happened to us. It happened to me when I was starting to do radio, that people were talking to me and I was like, oh, yeah, it happened to me. I was like, you don't notice when you do that. So the first thing is
But some of that's just because you're recording, so you don't want yourself on the tape.
Yes, no, that's the
So
first
if it's
thing.
prints, then that might be what Paula's saying. Like, if you're saying something that's really interesting, I'll be going just naturally. Oh yeah,
You do that
yeah,
naturally.
or
You
maybe
don't
not
know.
that much. But then that gets in the way of the recording, and it sounds stupid. So you have to learn how to stop talking when you're interviewing somebody. But for prints, it's not quite the same.
You have to start talking. I think as a journalist, first rule, stop talking.
But you can grunt affirmatively.
Yes. And you can, but I don't know exactly what do you mean. I mean, how do they phrase it?
Yeah, so if people have something great, but they say it in like 8 sentences.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, you use these tricks like, what is the thing that you want to say? What is exactly what you want to say? Could you repeat it to me? Or how would you say it? And then you go like that.
I also think it's great to get people out of their chair. If you go in, someone's at their desk and they're just kind of half asleep and bored and kind of looking at their watch. But if you, yeah, like people are now. But if you, if you get them up and you get them moving around and you kind of wake them up and you're talking and they get more energized, you're just going to get better stuff. And then get them into a situation. They're comfortable. Take me on a tour of your factory here. This looks really cool, man, and this is awesome. And then they're taking you around, and they're psyched about their big machine, and then they're all kind of fired up, and they're like talking to you. A great interview I did one time was the grandmother in the family that did Glen Ellen wines, like when it first started, and when they sold the winery for $80 million, whatever. And her husband had died, and the story was kind of the story of the family. And so we did that. Let's go for the tour, walk around. And then she's like busting out Chardonnay, and we're sitting there. I'm like, okay, I guess we'll. And then, she just had like a glass of Chardonnay and was sitting on the patio and had like just gave me this incredible interview for like 2 hours. It was just like the whole life history of the family. And it's like, I don't know, it seemed completely professional enough, but you don't want to be so stiff that they're uncomfortable. If the grandma of the family, if the matriarch of the family wants to grab a glass of wine and sit on the patio, it's like, fantastic, let's go sit on the patio.
So I think that's why we love radio, because it's human. It's about humans talking to other humans.
Yeah.
So that's it.
That's it.
I hope
Thanks
it's worked for you.